A 6-year-old genius guy enters the office of a millionaire CEO and says, "I'm here for the interview." The man is shocked to see that scene and decides to hire him. The boy goes through several obstacles, trials, and humiliation. Watch until the end to see this outcome. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel, don't forget to like this video, and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. Marcus Sterling's fingers drummed against the polished mahogany conference table, his steel-grey eyes fixed on the quarterly report spread before him. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, casting long shadows across the faces of 12 of New York's most powerful financial executives. Each had earned their seat at this table through decades of cutthroat decisions and calculated risks. Today, they would review Sterling Financial's latest acquisition strategy, a move that would cement their dominance in the market. The projections for Q3 are conservative, drawled Thomas Henderson, the chief financial officer, adjusting his gold cufflinks. We could push for a more aggressive approach in emerging markets. Marcus was about to respond when a slight commotion outside the conference room caught his attention. Through the glass walls, he could see his usually unflappable secretary, Mrs. Peterson, engaged in what appeared to be an animated discussion with someone out of view. He raised an eyebrow, irritated by the interruption. The heavy double doors swung open, and the entire room fell silent. Instead of the expected courier or junior executive, a small figure stepped into the room. A boy no more than 6 years old stood in the doorway. He wore a simple white shirt, slightly wrinkled khaki pants, and carried a worn leather briefcase that seemed comically large against his small frame. The contrast between the child and his surroundings was stark. The conference room, with its Italian marble floors and contemporary art pieces worth millions, had never seen anything quite like this. The boy's sneakers, though clean, were clearly well worn, and his hair needed a trim. "I'm here for the interview," the boy announced in a clear, steady voice that belied his obvious nervousness. Suppressed laughter rippled through the room. Henderson didn't bother hiding his amusement, letting out a sharp bark of laughter that made the boy flinch slightly, though he held his ground. "Mrs. Peterson," Marcus called out, his voice carrying the weight of authority that had made him legendary in financial circles. "There seems to be a misunderstanding." But before his secretary could escort the boy out, something unexpected happened. The child stepped forward, placed his briefcase on the table, and began pulling out a weathered notebook filled with calculations and charts. "Sir," the boy addressed Marcus directly, ignoring the smirks and whispers around him, "I've studied your company's investment model, and I found significant flaws in your strategy. If you give me 5 minutes, I can prove it." The room erupted in barely contained laughter. Victoria Chen, head of Asian markets, whispered to her colleague, "Is this take your child to work day? I must have missed the memo." Marcus raised his hand, silencing the room. Something in the boy's demeanor had caught his attention. It wasn't just the audacity of the situation, it was the quiet confidence in those young eyes, the way he held himself despite being surrounded by some of the most intimidating figures in finance. "You have 3 minutes, Marcus declared, shocking everyone present. "Make them count." The boy climbed onto one of the leather executive chairs, his feet dangling well above the floor. He opened his notebook, revealing pages dense with mathematical equations and market analyses that seemed far too complex for someone his age. "Your recent acquisition of Global Tech Solutions," the boy began, his small finger tracing a line of calculations, "was overvalued by approximately 30%. Henderson's smile vanished. That information wasn't public knowledge. In fact, it was something the board had been quietly concerned about for weeks. Furthermore, the boy continued, turning to a page filled with hand-drawn graphs based on market indicators and current trends, that investment will show significant depreciation within 6 months. The reason is simple, but something your analysts missed. The room had grown deathly quiet. The initial amusement had been replaced by a mixture of disbelief and growing unease. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the child who had just walked into his boardroom and challenged everything he thought he knew about business, success, and where wisdom truly comes from. In a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, Sarah Martinez's alarm clock blared at 4:30 a.m. She silenced it quickly, careful not to wake her son in the adjacent room. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped around her like a familiar blanket as she moved quietly through their modest home, preparing for another demanding day. The kitchen. Light flickered as she turned it on, illuminating walls covered with mathematical formulas written on paper sheets, complex equations that would baffle most adults, let alone children. These were Michael's work, her brilliant 6-year-old son who saw the world through numbers and patterns. Sarah paused at his bedroom door, watching him sleep peacefully. The sight brought tears to her eyes, not of sadness, but of fierce pride mixed with worry. Michael wasn't like other children his age. While they played with toys and video games, he spent hours solving complex mathematical problems and studying financial markets through borrowed books and whatever resources they could access at the public library. Their neighbor, Mr. Rodriguez, a retired economist, had been the first to recognize Michael's extraordinary gift. He had caught the boy analyzing stock market patterns in newspaper clippings he'd collected from recycling bins. Instead of dismissing him as a child playing pretend, Mr. Rodriguez had taken the time to teach him, sharing his knowledge and old textbooks. Sarah's thoughts drifted to the father who had abandoned them when Michael was just a baby. James hadn't been able to handle the responsibility of parenthood, leaving them with nothing but a hastily written note and unpaid bills. She had worked double shifts ever since, determined to give Michael everything he needed, even if it meant sacrificing her own dreams. The morning routine was a carefully choreographed dance. Sarah prepared Michael's lunch, laid out his clothes, and left detailed instructions for Mrs. Garcia, their elderly neighbor who would watch him until she returned from her first job. Between her positions as a morning shift supervisor at a local diner and evening office cleaner at a corporate building, Sarah barely had time to breathe. As she gathered her things, a small voice called out from behind her, "Mom!" Michael stood in his doorway, his dark hair tousled from sleep, clutching his precious briefcase, a gift from Mr. Rodriguez. The old leather case had once carried important financial documents. Now it held Michael's notebooks and dreams. "You should be sleeping, mijo," Sarah said softly, kneeling to his level. "I've been thinking about the meeting," Michael replied, his young face serious. "What if they don't listen to me?" Sarah's heart clenched. She knew about his plan to visit Sterling Financial, had tried to discourage him, knowing how cruel the corporate world could be. But Michael had been adamant, spending weeks preparing his analysis, convinced he had found critical flaws in their investment strategy. "Mi amor," she cupped his face in her hands, "you are the smartest, bravest person I know. If they don't listen, it's their loss. But promise me something. Promise you won't let them take away your spirit." Michael nodded solemnly, then surprised her with a tight hug. "I'm not doing this just for me, Mom. I'm doing it for us, and for all the other kids who people don't listen to because they're young or poor." Sarah held him close, fighting back tears. Her son spoke like someone far beyond his years, carrying wisdom that shouldn't belong to a child. She worried about the weight he placed on his young shoulders, but she also recognized that his gift came with a purpose. "Just remember," she whispered, "no matter what happens today, you've already proven that intelligence and determination don't care about zip codes or bank accounts." As Sarah left for work, she said a silent prayer. Her son was about to walk into the lion's den of high finance, armed only with his brilliant mind and unwavering conviction. She couldn't be there to protect him, but she had given him something more valuable than money or connections. She had given him the courage to believe in himself when the world seemed determined to dismiss him. The city was beginning to wake as Sarah caught her bus. Somewhere in the distance, the sun was rising over the skyscrapers, where her son would soon challenge the very foundations of financial power. Whatever happened today would change their lives forever, for better or worse. The boardroom remained silent as Michael pulled out another sheet of carefully prepared calculations. His small fingers traced the lines of data with surprising authority, and his voice grew stronger with each point he made. "Your acquisition of Global Tech Solutions ignored 3 critical market indicators," he explained, spreading out hand-drawn charts that showed remarkable attention to detail. First, their patent portfolio is heavily dependent on legacy systems that will become obsolete within 18 months. Second, their market share in emerging economies is artificially inflated by temporary government contracts that won't be renewed. And third, he paused, looking directly at Marcus Sterling, their R&D department has had no significant breakthroughs in the past 2 years, despite what their public reports suggest. Victoria Chen leaned forward, her earlier amusement completely gone. She had been one of the strongest advocates for the global tech acquisition, and hearing their strategy dismantled by a child was both fascinating and disturbing. How could you possibly know about their R&D department? Thomas Henderson demanded, his face flushing red with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. Michael reached into his briefcase and pulled out a stack of newspaper clippings, technical journals, and printed web articles. It's all public information. Sir, you just have to know where to look and how to connect the dots. Their top researchers have been quietly leaving the company. Their patent applications have dropped by 60%, and their supplier contracts show they're not ordering the materials needed for any major innovations. Marcus Sterling studied the boy with growing interest. In 30 years of business, he had never encountered anything quite like this. The child's analysis wasn't just impressive, it was transformative. He was seeing patterns that highly paid analysts had missed, making connections that experienced executives had overlooked. Continue, Marcus commanded, silencing Henderson's attempt to interrupt. What else have you found? Michael's eyes lit up with unexpected confidence. Your entire investment strategy is built on an outdated model that doesn't account for the rapid changes in technology and global market dynamics. You're still operating like it's the last century while the world has moved on. He pulled out a final sheet of paper, covered in complex calculations that looked more like advanced calculus than the work of a 6-year-old. I've developed an alternative model that could not only fix the global tech situation, but transform your entire approach to market analysis. The executives exchanged nervous glances. Some wore expressions of disbelief, others looked threatened, and a few seemed genuinely intrigued. Marcus noticed that Janet Wong, his head of innovation, was taking detailed notes. Your current model, Michael continued, standing on his chair to reach the center of the table, assumes market stability based on traditional indicators. But I've identified 15 new variables that your analysts aren't considering. Things like social media sentiment analysis, environmental policy shifts, and technological adaptation rates in developing nations. He began drawing on the boardroom's glass wall with a dry erase marker, creating a complex web of interconnected factors. His small hand moved with surprising speed and certainty, mapping out a vision of financial analysis that was both revolutionary and elegantly simple. See these connections? He asked, pointing to his diagram. Each decision ripples through the entire system. You can't just look at numbers on a spreadsheet anymore. You have to understand how everything is connected. Marcus stood up and walked to the glass wall, studying the boy's work. The pattern was unlike anything he'd seen before, yet it made perfect sense. It was as if he was seeing his own industry through entirely new eyes. Where did you learn all this? Marcus asked softly. Michael's confidence wavered slightly, showing the child beneath the analyst for the first time. I read a lot. Mr. Rodriguez, he used to be an economist. He helps me understand the big words. And I watch the markets every day at the library. The librarian lets me use the computer during quiet hours. The room fell silent again, but this time it was different. The initial skepticism had been replaced by something else, a growing realization that they were witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just a child playing at business. This was raw, unbridled talent that had somehow bloomed in the most unlikely of places. Marcus turned to face his executives, his expression unreadable. The decision he was about to make would either be remembered as his greatest triumph or his most spectacular failure. But looking at the complex diagram behind him, drawn by the steady hand of a 6-year-old visionary, he knew there was only one choice he could make. Marcus Sterling stood at his office window, looking out over the Manhattan skyline as the afternoon sun cast long shadows between the skyscrapers. Behind him, Michael sat in an oversized leather chair, his feet barely reaching the edge, while Thomas Henderson and Victoria Chen argued in heated whispers by the door. "This is unprecedented, Marcus," Henderson hissed, shooting a glance at the boy. "The board will think you've lost your mind. We can't seriously consider restructuring our entire investment strategy based on the theories of a child." But Marcus wasn't listening to Henderson. His mind was elsewhere, traveling back 25 years to another office, another time. He had been young then, hungry for success, willing to do whatever it took to climb the corporate ladder, including turning his back on his best friend, David Martinez, who had come to him with revolutionary ideas about market analysis. David had been brilliant, just like this boy, but he had lacked the connections, the polish, the pedigree that the financial world demanded. Marcus had chosen to ignore his friend's insights, to protect his own rising career instead of championing true innovation. Weeks later, David's predictions had proven correct, but by then it was too late. The friendship was broken, and David had disappeared into obscurity. Now, looking at Michael's reflection in the window, Marcus saw a chance for redemption. But more than that, he saw the future of finance sitting in his office, wearing sneakers with untied laces. "Victoria," Marcus said finally, turning from the window. "What do you think?" Chen straightened her blazer, choosing her words carefully. "The boy's analysis of global tech's weaknesses is disturbingly accurate, and his proposed model, while unconventional, could revolutionize how we approach market analysis, but," she glanced at Henderson, "the risks are significant." Michael watched the exchange silently, his dark eyes moving from one adult to another. He clutched his briefcase close, like a shield against their judgment. "Tell me, Michael," Marcus said, sitting down across from the boy. "Why did you really come here today? The truth." Michael's expression grew serious, showing a maturity that belied his years. "Because someone needs to show that good ideas can come from anywhere. My mum works 2 jobs, sir. She cleans offices at night in a building like this one. Every day, she tells me that being poor doesn't mean being stupid. But nobody listens to people like us." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Marcus felt something shift inside him, a wall crumbling that he hadn't even known he'd built. "Henderson," Marcus said, his voice taking on the tone that had made him famous in business. "Circles, call the board. Schedule an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. Victoria, I want a full analysis of Michael's model on my desk by midnight, and get PR ready. We're about to make history." "Marcus, you can't be serious," Henderson protested. "This isn't some fairy tale where we can just—" "That's exactly what this is, Thomas," Marcus interrupted, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "This is the story of how a 6-year-old boy from the wrong side of town walked into Sterling Financial and changed everything." He turned to Michael, whose eyes had grown wide with disbelief. "That is, if you're willing to help us make that change." Michael sat up straighter, his chin lifting with determination. "I have school in the morning, sir, and I need to be home by 4 to help my mum with dinner." A laugh escaped Victoria's lips, a genuine sound of surprise and delight. Even Henderson's stern expression cracked slightly. "We'll work around your schedule," Marcus assured him. "But first I think we need to meet your mother. I have a feeling she's an extraordinary woman." Michael smiled for the first time since entering the building, revealing the child behind the prodigy. "She is, sir. She's the one who taught me that. Numbers aren't just about money. They're about people." Marcus nodded, understanding now why this child saw patterns that his expensive analysts had missed. Michael didn't just see numbers on a page. He saw the human stories behind them, the connections that bound everything together. As Victoria led Michael out to get him a proper security badge, Marcus sat at his desk and began to write. Not a memo or a report, but a letter. To David Martinez, wherever he was now. It was time to acknowledge past mistakes and build a future where talent and innovation could come from anywhere, even from a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, where a single mother's sacrifice had nurtured a revolutionary mind. Sarah Martinez was wiping down tables at Eddie's diner when her manager approached with an unusual expression on his face. "Sarah, there are some people here to see you. They say it's important." Her heart stopped for a moment. Important visitors in suits usually meant bad news in her experience, but when she turned around, she saw Michael standing in the entrance, still carrying his briefcase, alongside a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit and a woman in a sleek business outfit. "Mrs. Martinez," the man stepped forward, extending his hand. "I'm Marcus Sterling, and this is Victoria Chen. Your son has given us quite a lot to think about today." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she removed her apron. She had been dreading this moment since Michael had first mentioned his plan to visit Sterling Financial. But instead of looking defeated or humiliated, her son was beaming with quiet pride. "Perhaps we could sit down and talk," Marcus suggested, gesturing toward an empty booth. Eddie, the diner's owner, quickly ushered them to a private corner and brought coffee for the adults and a chocolate milk for Michael. Sarah sat next to her son, protective instincts on high alert despite the visitor's friendly demeanor. "Your son," Marcus began, "has presented us with one of the most innovative financial analyses I've seen in my 30 years in business. His understanding of market dynamics is extraordinary, and his proposals could revolutionize how we approach investment strategy." Sarah's eyes widened. She looked at Michael, who gave her a small nod of confirmation. "He's always been special," she said softly, "but I never imagined—" "Mrs. Martinez," Victoria interjected, "we'd like to offer Michael a unique opportunity. We want to create a special advisory position for him, working directly with our analysis team. Of course, his education would come first, and we'd arrange the schedule around his school hours." Sarah's protective instincts flared. "My son is 6 years old. He needs to be a child, not a corporate consultant." "Mom," Michael spoke up, his voice clear and determined, "this is what I want. Remember what you always tell me about opportunities." Sarah felt tears threatening to form. She did remember. She had always taught him that true opportunities were rare and precious, that they needed to be grabbed with both hands when they appeared. Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mrs. Martinez, I understand your concerns. I'm not looking to exploit your son's talent. I want to nurture it. We're prepared to offer a comprehensive package that includes not just compensation for his contributions, but also educational, support, mentorship programs, and—" He paused, looking directly at Sarah. "A position for you in our corporate operations department, if you're interested." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. After years of working double shifts and struggling to make ends meet, the offer seemed too good to be true. But one look at Michael's hopeful face told her everything she needed to know. "There would be conditions," she said firmly, surprising herself with her boldness. "His childhood comes first. No late nights, no excessive pressure, and he needs time to just be a kid." Victoria smiled warmly. "We wouldn't want it any other way. In fact, we believe Michael's unique perspective comes partly from his balanced life experience. We're not looking to change who he is. We want to learn from him." Michael reached for his mother's hand under the table, squeezing it gently. It was a gesture he often used when she was worried about bills or tired from working too many hours. But this time, it felt different, like a promise of better days ahead. "There's something else you should know," Marcus added, his voice taking on a more personal tone. 25 years ago, I made a terrible mistake. I turned my back on a friend who had similar insights to your son's. His name was David Martinez." Sarah's face paled. "David was my husband." The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. Michael looked between his mother and Marcus, understanding dawning in his young eyes. The connection that had seemed random was anything but. It was the universe offering a chance at redemption for past wrongs. "I've spent years trying to find him," Marcus admitted. "To apologize, to make things right. I never knew he had a family, that his son would be the one to show me the error of my ways." Sarah's hand tightened around Michael's. "David left us when Michael was a baby. He couldn't handle the pressure of family life, of being a father. But he left us something precious. He left us his mind, his way of seeing patterns in everything." The afternoon sun streamed through the diner's windows, casting a warm glow over their booth. In that moment, surrounded by the smell of coffee and the quiet murmur of customers, 4 lives stood at a crossroads. The past and future seemed to merge, offering a chance to right old wrongs and build something new. The next morning, Sterling Financial's boardroom looked different. The usual austere atmosphere had been softened by the addition of a booster seat on one of the leather chairs, and a small table in the corner held a collection of children's books alongside financial reports. Michael arrived precisely at 9 a.m. after his morning classes, wearing a new button-down shirt that still had the store creases visible. Sarah had used part of the advance from Sterling Financial to buy him proper office attire, though she had insisted on keeping his comfortable sneakers, a reminder that he was still a child. The board members filed in, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Michael stood beside Marcus at the head of the table, his small stature a stark contrast to the corporate giant, yet there was something fitting about the image they presented. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, "today marks the beginning of a new era for Sterling Financial. We're not just changing our investment strategy, we're changing how we think about talent, innovation, and the future of finance." Victoria. Chen stepped forward with a sleek tablet, pulling up Michael's analysis on the room's giant screens. The complex web of interconnected factors that Michael had drawn yesterday had been transformed into a sophisticated digital model, but its revolutionary core remained intact. "As you can see," Victoria explained, "Michael's model takes into account factors that our traditional analysis has overlooked. By incorporating social trends, technological evolution patterns, and human behavior factors, we can predict market movements with unprecedented accuracy." One of the board members, an elderly man with wire-rimmed glasses, raised his hand. "This is all very impressive, but are we seriously proposing to restructure our entire operation based on the theories of a child?" Michael stepped forward, his voice clear and confident. "Sir, with respect, age doesn't determine the validity of ideas. Would you reject Einstein's theory of relativity if you learned he had conceived it as a child?" The room fell silent. Marcus couldn't help but smile. In less than 24 hours, Michael had already learned to hold his own in corporate warfare. "Let me demonstrate," Michael continued, pulling up a series of charts. "These show the actual performance of 5 major market sectors over the past year, and these," he switched to another screen, "show what my model predicted 6 months ago when I first started developing it." The correlation was undeniable. Michael's predictions had been startlingly accurate, catching nuances that traditional analysis had missed entirely. "But here's what's really important," Michael said, his young face serious. "This isn't just about making money. It's about understanding how our decisions affect real people. Every investment we make impacts thousands of lives. If we get it wrong, families suffer. If we get it right, communities thrive." Sarah, watching from a seat near the back of the room, felt tears of pride welling up in her eyes. Her son wasn't just sharing financial insights, he was teaching these powerful executives about humanity. Marcus took over, outlining the practical implementation of Michael's ideas. The plan was comprehensive, a new division focused on innovative analysis, educational partnerships with schools in underprivileged areas, and a mentorship program to identify and nurture young talent from all backgrounds. "Michael will serve as our special advisor," Marcus explained. "He'll work with our teams 3 afternoons a week after his regular classes. But more importantly, he'll help us build bridges to communities we've overlooked, to find other brilliant minds that just need a chance to shine." The board members began to nod, the initial skepticism giving way to genuine enthusiasm. Even the elderly gentleman who had questioned Michael's age was now taking detailed notes. As the presentation concluded, Victoria unveiled one final surprise. "We're also establishing the David Martinez Foundation for Financial Innovation," she announced, causing Sarah to gasp softly. "This foundation will provide scholarships and support for young people who show exceptional promise in financial analysis, regardless of their background." Michael turned to his mother, his eyes shining with a mixture of pride and determination. In that moment, he wasn't just a 6-year-old prodigy or a financial wizard. He was a son honoring his father's legacy while forging his own path. The meeting ended with a unanimous vote to approve the new initiatives. As the board members filed out, many stopped to shake Michael's hand, treating him not as a child, but as a respected colleague. The transformation was complete. Sterling Financial would never be the same. The news of Sterling Financial's young prodigy spread like wildfire through Wall Street. Financial publications scrambled to cover the story, with headlines ranging from "Child Genius Revolutionizes Wall Street" to "Sterling's Desperate Publicity Stunt." The corporate world was divided, with some praising the innovative approach, while others scoffed at the very idea of taking advice from a 6-year-old. Michael's first month at Sterling Financial brought both triumphs and challenges. Despite his incredible intellect, he was still a child navigating an adult world. One particularly challenging afternoon, Victoria found him hiding in the company library, tears streaming down his face. "They don't really want my ideas," he whispered as she sat beside him. "Mr. Henderson keeps changing my reports before they go to the board. He says they need to be more conventional." Victoria pulled up a chair, her usual corporate demeanor softening. "Want to know? It's a secret. Henderson is scared. People like him have spent decades building their careers on traditional methods. Your ideas threaten everything they think they know about finance." Michael wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "But I'm not trying to threaten anyone. I just want to help make things better." "I know," Victoria smiled, "and that's exactly why Marcus and I believe in you. Sometimes the best ideas come from people who aren't trying to protect the old way of doing things." The conversation was interrupted by Sarah, who had just finished her day in the operations department. Her new position had revealed her own talent for organizational efficiency, and she'd already implemented several improvements in the company's workflow. "Everything okay, mijo?" she asked, noting Michael's red eyes. Before he could respond, Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression unusually animated. "Michael, remember your prediction about the tech sector vulnerability? You were right. The market just proved it." He spread out several reports on the library table. The numbers were clear. Michael's analysis had accurately predicted a significant shift that traditional models had missed completely. Even Henderson couldn't argue with these results. "But that's not why I'm here," Marcus continued, pulling up a chair. "I want to talk about the David Martinez Foundation. We've identified our first group of potential scholarship recipients, and I'd like you to help review their applications." Michael's eyes lit up. "Really? You want my opinion?" "Of course." Marcus nodded. Who better to recognize hidden potential than someone who had to fight to be recognized himself? Sarah watched the exchange with a mixture of pride and concern. Her son was thriving in many ways, but she worried about the pressure he faced. "Perhaps we should take a break this weekend," she suggested. "When was the last time you just played with kids your own age?" Victoria jumped in before Michael could protest. "Actually, that's perfect timing. My daughter's having a birthday party on Saturday. Lots of games, cake, and not a single spreadsheet in sight. What do you say, Michael? Want to be my special guest?" The boy's face showed a moment of uncertainty. He had grown so accustomed to his role as the company's prodigy that the idea of just being a kid seemed almost foreign. But then a smile spread across his face, the kind of pure childish joy that reminded everyone in the room of his true age. "Can I bring my friend Tommy from school?" he asked hopefully. "He's really good at soccer, and he never makes fun of me for liking math." "Of course," Victoria laughed. "The more the merrier." As they left the library, Marcus held back, watching Sarah guide her son toward the elevator. "We need to be careful," he said quietly to Victoria. "It's easy to forget. He's just a child when he's revolutionizing our entire business model." Victoria nodded, remembering her own childhood dreams that had been sacrificed on the altar of adult expectations. Maybe that's exactly why his insights are so valuable. He sees things we've forgotten how to see. The next morning, Michael arrived at the office wearing his soccer jersey under his button-down shirt, ready for an afternoon of play after his morning meetings. The sight made even Henderson smile, though he quickly hid it behind his usual stern expression. The balance between Michael's extraordinary gift and his need to just be a child was delicate. But with his mother's guidance and the support of his newfound mentors, he was learning to navigate both worlds. His presence continued to challenge the established order at Sterling Financial, forcing everyone to question their assumptions about where wisdom truly comes from. The David Martinez Foundation's first public event was held in a community center in Michael's old neighborhood. The room was filled with children from diverse backgrounds, their parents and a surprising number of Wall Street executives who had never ventured to this part of the city before. Michael stood at the podium, now comfortable in his role as the Foundation's young ambassador. His new suit was perfectly tailored, but he still wore his favorite sneakers, a personal trademark that had become something of a sensation in financial circles. "Numbers are everywhere," he began, his voice clear and confident. "They're in the way birds fly in formation, in the patterns of leaves on trees, and in the decisions that shape our economy. But the most important numbers are the ones that tell human stories." The audience listened intently as Michael explained the Foundation's mission. They weren't just looking for children who were good at math. They were searching for innovative thinkers who could see beyond traditional boundaries. In the front row, Mr. Rodriguez, the retired economist who had first recognized Michael's gift, wiped tears from his eyes. Beside him sat Mrs. Garcia, the neighbor who had watched Michael after school while Sarah worked her double shifts. They represented the often overlooked support system that had helped nurture a remarkable mind. Sarah, now dressed in a professional outfit that reflected her new position at Sterling Financial, watched her son with pride. The past few months had brought changes she could never have imagined, but she had made sure they hadn't changed who Michael was at his core. After the presentation, children and parents lined up to speak with Michael. One girl, about his age, showed him a notebook filled with drawings of market trends she'd observed in her family's small grocery store. Another boy explained his theory about how video game virtual economies could predict real-world market behavior. Marcus Sterling, watching from the back of the room, leaned over to Victoria. "Look at how they respond to him. He's not just a role model, he's proof that their dreams are valid." Victoria nodded, thinking of her own daughter who had recently started showing interest in economics, inspired by Michael's example. "He's changing more than just our investment strategies. He's changing how we think about potential." The Foundation's first round of scholarships would support 50 young innovators, providing them with educational resources, mentorship, and opportunities to develop their ideas. But more importantly, it was changing the conversation about where talent could be found. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Michael sat with a group of children his age, finally relaxing into just being a kid. They were trading baseball cards and talking about their favorite video games, though occasionally the conversation would drift to complex mathematical concepts that would have baffled most adults. Sarah found Marcus standing by the window watching the scene. "Thank you," she said softly, "not just for the opportunities you've given us, but for letting Michael show you a different way of seeing things." Marcus shook his head. "No, thank you and Michael for helping me remember why I got into finance in the first place. It was never about the money. It was about building something meaningful, about making a difference." As they spoke, Henderson approached, looking uncharacteristically humble. "Mrs. Martinez, I owe you and your son an apology. I was wrong to resist his ideas simply because of his age. His latest analysis of the Asian markets saved us from a significant loss. I've learned more from him in these past months than in 20 years of traditional business." Sarah accepted his apology with grace, understanding that change wasn't easy for anyone. She watched as Michael showed his new friends the basic concepts of market analysis, using trading cards as examples, making complex ideas accessible through play. The event concluded with an unexpected announcement. Sterling Financial would be expanding the Foundation's reach internationally, setting up similar programs in developing countries. Michael's revolutionary approach to financial analysis would be taught alongside traditional methods in some of the world's most prestigious business schools. But perhaps the most significant change was invisible to most observers. In boardrooms, Across the financial district, executives were beginning to ask different questions. Instead of just focusing on profit margins and market share, they were considering the human impact of their decisions. Michael's influence had sparked a subtle but profound shift in how the financial world operated. As the last guests departed, Michael yawned, finally showing signs of tiredness after his big day. He had proven that brilliance knows no boundaries of age or background, but he was still a child who needed his rest. Sarah gathered their things, ready to take him home to their new apartment, not too far from their old neighborhood, because Michael had insisted on staying close to his roots. 6 months into Michael's tenure at Sterling Financial, the company faced its first major test. A global market fluctuation threatened to destabilize several key investments, and the pressure to respond quickly mounted. The board called an emergency meeting, but this time, something was different about their young advisor. Michael sat in his usual spot next to Marcus, but his usual confidence seemed shaken. The numbers on his tablet swam before his eyes, and for the first time since joining the company, he felt overwhelmed. The weight of responsibility pressed down on his small shoulders like a physical burden. Victoria noticed his distress first. She had become attuned to the subtle signs that showed. When Michael was struggling to balance his extraordinary abilities with his need to just be a child. During a brief break in the meeting, she pulled Marcus aside. "Something's wrong," she whispered, gesturing toward Michael, who was unusually quiet and withdrawn. "He's not himself today." Marcus watched as Michael stared at his calculations, his small face creased with worry. "Maybe we've been pushing too hard," he admitted. "He's been working on this analysis for days." Sarah, who had been attending the meeting as part of her new role in operations, approached her son. "Mijo, what's bothering you? You can tell us." Michael looked up, his eyes filling with tears. "What if I'm wrong?" he whispered. "What if my calculations are wrong and people lose their jobs because of me? Tommy's dad works at one of the companies we're investing in. And if I make a mistake?" The room fell silent. It was a stark reminder that behind the brilliant mind and sophisticated analysis was a 6-year-old boy who cared deeply about the human impact of their financial decisions. Marcus knelt beside Michael's chair, his voice gentle. "Do you remember what you told me the first day you walked into my office? You said that numbers aren't just about money, they're about people. That's why your insights are so valuable. You see both sides of the equation." "But the variables keep changing," Michael protested. "The market is moving too fast and I can't keep up with everything." Victoria stepped forward, an idea forming. "Then maybe we shouldn't try to keep up with everything. Maybe that's been our mistake all along." She pulled up Michael's original model on the main screen, the elegant web of interconnected factors that had revolutionized their approach to market analysis. "Look at what you created, Michael. It's not about predicting every movement. It's about understanding the connections between things." Henderson, who had become one of Michael's strongest supporters, added his voice. "The boy's right to be cautious. We've become too dependent on his insights. We need to combine his innovative approach with our experience." Sarah watched the exchange with growing pride. Her son wasn't just learning to navigate the financial world. He was teaching these seasoned professionals the importance of humility and human connection in their decision-making. Marcus stood up, addressing the room. "I propose we approach this differently. Instead of rushing to react to market movements, let's take a step back. Michael, I want you to work with Victoria and Henderson, not to find an immediate solution, but to understand the human stories behind these numbers." The tension in Michael's shoulders eased slightly. This was the kind of analysis he understood, looking at how market changes affected real people and communities. Over the next few hours, the team worked together in a new way. Michael's innovative model provided the framework, while the experienced executives filled in the practical details. They looked beyond mere profit margins to consider the long-term impact on employees, communities, and sustainable growth. By evening, they had developed a response strategy that was both financially sound and socially responsible. It wasn't the quickest solution, but it was one that everyone, including Michael, felt confident about. As the team prepared to implement their plan, Sarah found her son sitting quietly in the corner, sketching mathematical patterns in his notebook. "You did good today, mijo," she said softly. Michael looked up, his expression thoughtful. "I learned something important, Mum. It's okay not to have all the answers. Sometimes asking the right questions is more important." The crisis had revealed something crucial about Sterling Financial's transformation. It wasn't just about incorporating a child prodigy's brilliant insights. It was about learning to approach finance with both intelligence and heart. Michael's moment of vulnerability had sparked a deeper change in how the company operated. As they left the office that evening, Marcus watched Michael walking hand in hand with his mother, his briefcase clutched in his free hand. The boy had taught them all a valuable lesson. True innovation comes not from having all the answers, but from being willing to question everything, including yourself. The following weeks brought a subtle but significant shift in how Sterling Financial operated. Michael's moment of vulnerability had sparked a new approach to decision-making that combined analytical precision with emotional intelligence. The key, company's boardroom, once a temple to pure numbers, now regularly echoed with discussions about community impact and social responsibility. One morning, Michael arrived at the office to find an unusual scene. The usual array of financial reports and market analyses had been replaced by photographs, letters, and personal stories from employees and community members affected by Sterling's investments. "What's all this?" he asked Victoria, who was arranging the materials on the conference table. "Your idea," she smiled. "Remember when you said we needed to understand the human stories behind the numbers? We're putting that into practice." The day's meeting wasn't about quarterly profits or market projections. Instead, they were reviewing the real-world impact of their recent decisions. Tommy's father, along with other employees from companies in Sterling's portfolio, had been invited to share their experiences. Michael listened intently as workers spoke about how the company's new investment approach had affected their lives. One woman described how the additional training programs had helped her advance in her career. A young entrepreneur shared how the David Martinez Foundation had given him the opportunity to develop his ideas. During a break, Michael found himself sharing his sandwich with Tommy, who had come along with his father. The two boys sat in Marcus's office, their legs dangling from the leather sofa, as they talked about video games and mathematics with equal enthusiasm. "You know what's cool?" Tommy said between bites. "My dad says work is different now. He used to be scared when the big bosses made decisions, but now they actually ask people what they think." Michael beamed with pride. This was exactly what he had hoped for, not just changing investment strategies, but changing how people were treated. Sarah, watching from the doorway, remembered the nervous little boy who had first walked into Sterling Financial with his worn briefcase and revolutionary ideas. Now, 6 months later, he had transformed not just a company, but an entire approach to business. Later that afternoon, Marcus called a special meeting. The board members filed in, followed by a group of children, the first recipients of the David Martinez Foundation scholarships. Michael stood among them, no longer the sole young voice in the room. "Today marks a new chapter for Sterling Financial," Marcus announced. "We're launching a program that will bring together our brightest young minds with our most experienced professionals, because we've learned that true innovation comes from bridging generations and perspectives." The children presented their own analyses of various market sectors, each bringing a fresh viewpoint that challenged conventional wisdom. Michael watched with pride as his peers demonstrated that his success wasn't a fluke. There were brilliant, young minds everywhere, just waiting for an opportunity to shine. Henderson, who had once been the biggest skeptic of Michael's involvement, now served as a mentor to several of the Foundation's scholars. He had discovered that teaching young people forced him to question his own assumptions and think in new ways. "You know what the best part is?" he confided to Victoria during the presentations. "They don't just make us better investors, they make us better people." As the day drew to a close, Michael sat in his special corner of the library, surrounded by both financial textbooks and children's stories. He was working on a new project, creating simplified versions of his market analysis models that other kids could understand. "What are you writing?" Sarah asked, finding him surrounded by colorful diagrams and simple explanations. "A book," he replied, not looking up from his work. "For kids like me who love numbers but don't know how to tell their stories yet." Marcus, overhearing the conversation, smiled. The boy who had walked into his office half a year ago hadn't just changed their investment strategy, he had sparked a revolution in how they thought about business, talent, and human potential. The sun was setting over the city skyline, casting long shadows through the library windows. In those golden rays, Michael continued to write, combining complex financial concepts with the simple wisdom that had made him special. The understanding that behind every number was a human story waiting to be told. Word of Sterling Financial's revolutionary approach had spread far beyond Wall Street. Media outlets around the world were clamoring for interviews with the young prodigy who had transformed one of the most prestigious financial institutions. However, Michael's story had evolved into something much bigger than just a tale of a child genius. One crisp autumn morning, Michael arrived at the office to find the lobby filled with an unusual crowd. Representatives from various Fortune 500 companies had gathered, all seeking to understand and potentially implement Sterling's new human-centered approach to finance. "They're here for the Innovation Summit," Victoria explained, guiding Michael through the crowd. "But they're not just interested in our investment strategies anymore. They want to know how we've managed to change the entire corporate culture." The summit was being held in Sterling's largest conference center, transformed for the occasion with interactive displays showcasing the company's journey over the past 8 months. Michael's original hand-drawn diagrams were displayed prominently alongside the sophisticated systems they had inspired. As Michael prepared for his presentation, he noticed something different about the audience. Unlike previous corporate gatherings, this one included children, young scholars from the David Martinez Foundation, sitting confidently among CEOs and business leaders. "Ready for your big speech?" Sarah asked, adjusting his tie. She had taken the morning off from her new position as Director of Community Integration to support her son. Michael nodded, though his expression was thoughtful. "Mom, I want to do something different today. Instead of talking about finance, I want to talk about dreams." The presentation began with Marcus introducing Michael, but this time, the young advisor took an unexpected approach. Instead of diving into market analyses and investment strategies, he began with a story. 8 months ago, I walked into this building with a worn briefcase and a head full of numbers," he started, his voice clear and confident. "But what I really carried was a dream that good ideas could come from anywhere. That age and background shouldn't determine whether your voice is heard." He gestured to the young scholars in the audience. "Look around this room. Every person here has a unique way of seeing the world. The mistake we made in finance wasn't just about how we calculated risks or managed investments. It was about thinking that wisdom only came in certain packages." The audience listened intently as Michael shared stories of the Foundation's scholars. A 12-year-old girl from the Bronx who had developed an algorithm to predict community development patterns. A 9-year-old boy from Queens who had created a mathematical model for sustainable urban farming. "But here's what makes Sterling different now," Michael continued, walking among the audience. "We don't just listen to new ideas, we learn from them. Every person in this company, from the CEO to the newest intern, is both a teacher and a student." Victoria stepped forward to demonstrate how they had integrated Michael's innovative approaches with traditional financial wisdom. The result was a hybrid system that combined the best of both worlds, youthful innovation and seasoned experience. Henderson, now one of the program's strongest advocates, shared how mentoring young minds had transformed his own approach to finance. "These children don't just see numbers," he explained, "they see possibilities that we've forgotten to imagine." As the presentation continued, something remarkable happened. The corporate leaders in the audience began engaging directly with the young scholars, asking questions and listening intently to their perspectives. The artificial barriers of age and status seemed to dissolve. Marcus watched from the side of the stage, remembering his own journey from skeptic to believer. The company he had built on traditional financial principles had been transformed into something he never could have imagined, a place where innovation knew no boundaries. Sarah, sitting in the front row, felt tears welling up in her eyes. Her son had done more than succeed in the corporate world. He had helped create a new kind of corporate world, one that valued human potential in all its forms. As the summit drew to a close, Michael shared one final thought. "The future of finance isn't just about making smart investments," he said, his young face serious. "It's about investing in people. Because when we give everyone a chance to share their dreams, we all become richer." The applause that followed wasn't just for Michael's words. It was for the vision of a future where success was measured not just in profits, but in possibilities. As the audience rose to their feet, the young scholars among them stood tallest of all, knowing that their voices would be heard. The success of the Innovation Summit catalyzed a series of changes that rippled through the financial industry. Other companies began implementing their own versions of Sterling's inclusive approach, though none quite captured the magic of the original. What made Sterling unique wasn't just their programs or policies. It was the authentic commitment to valuing every voice, regardless of its source. One morning, as Michael worked on his latest analysis in the company library, he received an unexpected visitor. A woman in a wheelchair rolled up to his table, introducing herself as Dr. Emily Chen, Victoria's sister and a renowned professor of economics. "I've been following your work," she said, smiling warmly. "But I'm not here to talk about finance. I'm here to talk about education." Michael listened intently as Dr. Chen shared her vision. She wanted to create a new kind of school, one that would combine traditional education with the innovative approaches developed at Sterling. Students would learn not just subjects, but how to see the connections between them. "We want you to help design the curriculum," she explained, "not as a teacher, but as someone who understands how young minds think differently." The idea excited Michael. He had been working on ways to make financial concepts more accessible to children, but this was an opportunity to reshape education itself. He immediately began sketching ideas in his notebook, drawing connections between mathematics, science, art, and human experience. Sarah found them later, surrounded by papers filled with educational frameworks and learning models. "Another big project?" she asked, recognizing the enthusiastic gleam in her son's eyes. "Mom, we're going to build a school," Michael exclaimed. "But not just any school, a place where kids can learn the way they think naturally, where being different is seen as an advantage." The news of Sterling Financial's venture into education spread quickly. Critics questioned whether a financial institution should be involved in education, but supporters saw it as a natural evolution of the company's commitment to nurturing potential. Marcus called a special meeting to discuss the initiative. The boardroom had changed significantly over the months. The stark corporate aesthetic had been softened by children's artwork and innovative design elements that stimulated creative thinking. "This isn't just about creating future financial analysts," Michael explained to the board. "It's about teaching children to see the world in new ways, to understand that every subject is connected to real life." Victoria, who had been quietly supporting her sister's educational work for years, added her perspective. "We've learned that innovation doesn't follow traditional boundaries. Why should education?" The proposal faced its share of challenges. Regulatory hurdles, curriculum requirements, and logistical complications threatened to derail the project. But Michael approached these obstacles the same way he approached financial problems, by looking for unexpected connections and solutions. He worked with Dr. Chen to develop a learning model that combined traditional subjects with real-world applications. Mathematics wasn't just about solving equations, it was about understanding patterns in nature and society. Science wasn't isolated in a laboratory. It was connected to economics, art, and human behavior. Sarah watched her son pour himself into the project, amazed at how he balanced his role at Sterling with this new venture. He still attended regular classes, played with friends, and maintained his childlike wonder at the world. If anything, the school project had energized him, giving him a new way to share his unique perspective. The first pilot program was scheduled to launch in the coming spring. Students would be selected from diverse backgrounds, with a special focus on identifying and nurturing unique ways of thinking. The David Martinez Foundation would provide scholarships to ensure that financial barriers wouldn't prevent talented children from participating. As Michael finalized the curriculum proposals with Dr. Chen, he reflected on his own journey. "You know what I've learned?" he said to her. "Every child has a different way of seeing the world. We just need to give them the chance to show us what they see." The sun streamed through the library windows, casting rainbow patterns through the crystal paperweights on Michael's desk. In those dancing lights, he saw a reflection of what he had helped create, a world where differences were celebrated, where innovation could come from anywhere, and where every voice had the potential to change the future. Spring arrived with a burst of energy as the pilot educational program, now named the Connections Academy, prepared to open its doors. The former warehouse space in Michael's old neighborhood had been transformed into a vibrant learning environment. With walls covered in interactive displays and spaces designed to encourage collaboration, Michael stood in what would soon be the main learning hub, surrounded by the physical manifestation of his ideas. Instead of traditional classrooms, the space featured flexible learning pods that could be reconfigured based on the day's activities. Digital screens displayed real-time data from financial markets, alongside artistic interpretations of mathematical concepts. "What do you think?" Dr. Chen asked, watching Michael explore the space. "It's quite different from conventional schools." "It's perfect," Michael replied, his eyes bright with excitement. "It's like how my mind works and everything connected, nothing in isolation." The first group of students would arrive next week. 50 young innovators selected from thousands of applicants. The selection process had focused not on traditional academic metrics, but on identifying unique ways of thinking and problem-solving abilities. Sarah, who had been instrumental in organizing the community aspects of the program, joined them with a stack of student profiles. "You might want to see this," she said, handing Michael one particular file. The application was from a young girl named Maria Rodriguez, Mr. Rodriguez's granddaughter. The retired economist who had first recognized Michael's potential had kept quiet about his granddaughter's similar gifts, not wanting to take advantage of their connection. But her application had stood out on its own merits. "She sees music in market patterns," Michael explained, reading through her analysis. "Look at how she converted stock market trends into musical compositions, and then used those patterns to predict market movements." Victoria arrived with the latest updates from Sterling Financial. The company's transformation had continued, with the educational initiative drawing positive attention from around the world. Other financial institutions were beginning to follow their lead, recognizing that innovation could come from unexpected sources. "The board has officially approved the expansion plan," she announced. "Once we prove the concept here, we'll be opening similar schools in other cities." As they discussed the future, a small group gathered outside the building. Families from the neighborhood, curious about the changes coming to their community. Michael noticed them and made an impromptu decision. "Let's give them a tour," he suggested. "After all, this school belongs to the community as much as anyone." The families were invited inside, and Michael led them through the space, explaining the vision in terms everyone could understand. He showed them how traditional subjects would be connected to real-world applications, how students would learn by doing rather than just memorizing. One parent, a construction worker, was particularly moved. "You mean my daughter could learn geometry by understanding how I calculate building measurements?" he asked. "Exactly," Michael exclaimed. "Every job, every skill, every experience has value. We just need to understand the connections." The tour ended in the school's central gathering space, where a large digital display showed a map of community connections, linking local businesses, schools, families, and resources in an intricate web of relationships. "This is more than just a school," Michael explained to the gathered families. "It's a place where we learn from each other, where every person's experience adds to our understanding." As the day drew to a close, Marcus visited the site, taking in the transformation. "You know," he said to Michael, "when you first walked into my office, I thought I was taking a risk by listening to a child. Now I realize the real risk would have been not listening." Sarah watched her son moving confidently through the space he had helped create. explaining his vision to others with the same enthusiasm he'd shown that first day at Sterling Financial. He was still a child in many ways. His eyes still lit up at the mention of ice cream, and he still wore his favorite sneakers. But he had become something more as well, a bridge between worlds that had once seemed impossibly far apart. The sunset painted the school's windows in shades of gold and purple, creating patterns that reminded Michael of the market trends he loved to analyze. But now those patterns meant more than just numbers. They represented the countless connections that bound communities together, the invisible threads that linked dreams to reality. Tomorrow the school would welcome its first students, each bringing their own unique way of seeing the world, and Michael couldn't wait to learn what they would teach him. The first day of the Connections Academy dawned bright and clear. Michael arrived early, wearing his usual combination of formal shirt and comfortable sneakers, his excitement barely contained. The building hummed with anticipation as the first students began to arrive. Maria Rodriguez, Mr. Rodriguez's granddaughter, was among the first to enter. She carried a violin case alongside her laptop, ready to demonstrate her unique approach to market analysis through musical patterns. Behind her came twins who had developed an artificial intelligence program to predict weather patterns' effects on agricultural economies. Each student brought something special, a different way of seeing the world, a unique perspective that challenged conventional thinking. Michael moved among them, no longer feeling like an outlier, but rather part of a community of innovative minds. "Welcome to your first day," he began, addressing the gathered students and their families. "But before we start, I want you to know something important. This isn't just a school. It's a place where your differences are your strengths." The morning's activities began with what Michael called connection sessions, exercises designed to help students recognize patterns between seemingly unrelated subjects. Maria demonstrated how she translated market movements into musical notes, creating a symphony from financial data that revealed hidden patterns in market behavior. "Listen to how the rhythm changes during market volatility," she explained, playing her violin while a screen displayed corresponding market graphs. "The music helps us feel the patterns that numbers alone might miss." Other students shared their own unique approaches. The twins explained how their weather prediction algorithm could help small farmers make better planting decisions. A quiet boy named James showed how he used origami principles to understand complex architectural engineering concepts. Sarah, watching from the sidelines, felt tears of joy forming. This was everything she had dreamed of for her son, a place where brilliant minds could flourish without having to hide their uniqueness. Victoria and Dr. Chen moved through the groups, taking notes on the various learning styles and approaches they observed. The curriculum would continue to evolve, shaped by the students' own innovations and discoveries. During the lunch break, Michael sat with his new classmates in the school's garden, another of his innovations. The space was designed to demonstrate the connections between agriculture, economics, and community sustainability. "You know what's really cool?" one student said between bites of her sandwich. "Nobody here thinks we're weird for loving math or seeing patterns in everything." Michael smiled, remembering how lonely he had felt before finding his place at Sterling Financial. "That's because we understand that being different isn't a weakness, it's a superpower." The afternoon brought a surprise visitor. Henderson, who had once been skeptical of Michael's abilities, arrived with news from Sterling Financial. The company's new approach had led to unprecedented success, with their human-centered investment strategies proving more resilient than traditional models. But more importantly, Henderson announced to the gathered students, "We've learned that the best innovations come from unexpected places. That's why Sterling Financial is establishing a permanent partnership with the Connections Academy. Every student here will have the opportunity to intern with us, to share their unique perspectives, and help shape the future of finance." The announcement was met with excited chatter. These children, who had often felt out of place in traditional educational settings, were being offered a chance to prove their value in the real world. As the first day drew to a close, Michael found himself in the school's observation dome, a glass-enclosed space on the roof where students could study the patterns in nature and relate them to their academic studies. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, reflecting off the city's buildings in a display of natural geometry. Mr. Rodriguez joined him there, his eyes misty with emotion. "When I first met you, Michael, I knew you were special. But what you've created here is beyond anything I could have imagined." Michael turned to his old mentor, smiling. "I just helped create the place I wished had existed when I was younger. A place where being different is celebrated, where seeing the world in unusual ways is considered a gift." Below them, the last of the students were leaving for the day, chattering excitedly about their projects and discoveries. Each carried with them not just knowledge, but a newfound confidence in their unique abilities. The Connections Academy was more than just a school. It was proof that innovation could come from anywhere, that brilliance wore many faces, and that the future belonged to those who dared to see the world differently. As autumn painted the city in vibrant colors, the Connections Academy had grown into something far beyond its original vision. The pilot program's success had attracted attention from educators, business leaders, and innovators worldwide. But for Michael, the most significant measure of success wasn't in the headlines or accolades. It was in the daily transformations he witnessed. One crisp morning, he arrived at the academy to find Maria Rodriguez conducting an unusual experiment. She had connected her violin to a computer that translated market data into musical notes, while other students moved wooden blocks around a large table, physically representing market movements. "We're creating a three-dimensional model of market behavior," Maria explained, her bow dancing across the strings. "When you combine the visual, auditory, and tactile elements, patterns emerge that we couldn't see before." Michael watched in amazement as the students worked together, each contributing their unique perspective to create something entirely new. The twins had integrated their weather prediction algorithm into the model, while James used his origami skills to create paper structures that represented different market scenarios. Victoria arrived with a group of international observers, educators and business leaders who had traveled from around the world to witness the Academy's innovative approach. Among them was a woman from Singapore who had tears in her eyes as she watched the students work. "In my country," she said softly, "I have a daughter who thinks differently, who sees patterns in everything. For years I thought she needed to change. Now I understand. We're the ones who need to change how we think about thinking." The GI observation group moved through the Academy's various learning spaces, each designed to encourage different types of connection making. In the pattern lab, students used art and technology to explore mathematical concepts. The Community Connection Center linked students with local businesses and organizations, creating real-world learning opportunities. Sarah, who now served as the Academy's Community Integration Director, led a session demonstrating how they had woven local knowledge into the curriculum. A neighborhood auto mechanic taught physics through car repair, while a local chef explored chemistry through cooking. "Every community has its own wisdom," Sarah explained to the visitors. "We just need to recognize it and give it value." During lunch, Michael sat with a group of new students who had recently joined the academy. One boy, shy and hesitant, reminded Michael of himself from a year ago. "I used to think I was broken," the boy confided, "because I couldn't learn the way other kids did. But here, I'm learning that there are many ways to understand things." Marcus Sterling, who had become a regular visitor to the academy, arrived with exciting news. Other companies, inspired by Sterling Financial's success, were beginning to establish their own educational initiatives. The movement that had started, with one small boy walking into a corporate office, was now spreading across the globe. "But they're missing something crucial," Marcus observed, watching the students work. "They're trying to replicate the program without understanding its heart, the belief that every mind has value, that innovation can come from anywhere." Michael nodded, understanding exactly what Marcus meant. The Academy's success wasn't just in its innovative teaching methods or its connections to the business world. It was in its fundamental respect for different ways of thinking, its celebration of unique perspectives. Later that afternoon, Michael led a special session in the observation dome. Students lay on cushions, looking up at the sky through the glass ceiling, finding patterns in cloud formations and relating them to market trends, mathematical sequences, and natural phenomena. Every pattern tells a story, Michael explained to his fellow students. The key is learning to read those stories in your own way. Dr. Chen joined them, carrying a thick folder of research data. The Academy's approach was producing remarkable results. Students were not only excelling academically, but were developing innovative solutions to real-world problems. But the most important outcomes can't be measured in test scores, she noted, watching the students engage with their surroundings. We're seeing children who once felt out of place discovering their own value, their own voice. As the day drew to a close, Michael found himself back in the main learning hub, surrounded by the evidence of the day's discoveries. Whiteboards filled with equations, artistic interpretations of scientific principles, and maps showing the countless connections between ideas and reality. A small group of students had stayed late, working on a project to help local small businesses better understand and adapt to market changes. They were applying the Academy's principles in ways Michael hadn't even imagined, proving that innovation truly was a continuous process of growth and discovery. The winter sun cast long shadows through the windows of Sterling Financial as Michael prepared for one of the most important presentations of his life. 1 year had passed since he first walked into the building with his worn briefcase and revolutionary ideas. Now he stood before a different kind of audience, not executives or board members, but a group of children from around the world who had been identified as potential students for the expanding Connections Academy program. The boardroom had been transformed. Gone were the intimidating rows of chairs and the austere corporate atmosphere. Instead, the space had been arranged in a circle with interactive displays showing the journey of the past year, from Michael's first financial analysis to the creation of the Academy. A year ago, Michael began, his voice steady and confident, I stood in this room trying to prove that good ideas can come from anywhere. Today, I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to listen to your ideas. One by one, the children shared their unique perspectives. A girl from Kenya described how she used traditional weaving patterns to understand complex computer coding sequences. A boy from Brazil explained how he had developed a system to predict rainfall by observing ant behavior, helping local farmers plan their planting schedules. Sarah watched from the side of the room, remembering the nervous little boy who had once practiced his presentation in their small apartment kitchen. Now her son moved with easy confidence among these young innovators, not as a prodigy set apart, but as one of many bright minds sharing their gifts with the world. Victoria and Marcus joined the session, accompanied by representatives from educational institutions and businesses around the globe. The Connections Academy model was being adapted for different cultures and contexts, each version unique, but all sharing the core principle that innovation flourishes when different ways of thinking are valued and nurtured. During a break, Henderson approached Michael with an unusual request. My granddaughter, he said somewhat hesitantly, she sees numbers in colors. For years we thought it was something to fix, but after everything I've learned from you, Michael smiled, understanding immediately. Bring her to the Academy. We have a student who experiences numbers the same way. She's developed an incredible system for visual market analysis. The afternoon session brought another surprise. Mr. Rodriguez arrived with a group of retired professionals, former teachers, engineers, and business people from the community. They had formed a mentorship network, offering their experience and wisdom to support the Academy's students. You taught us something important, Michael, Mr. Rodriguez said, his voice thick with emotion. You showed us that wisdom doesn't belong to any one generation or background. It grows when we share it. As the day progressed, Michael led a special demonstration of how the Academy had evolved. Students from the first class joined virtually from around the world, sharing how they had adapted the program's principles to their own communities. Maria Rodriguez, now leading a music-based financial analysis program in her own community, performed a virtual duet with a student in Tokyo who had developed a similar system. The harmony of their collaboration transcended language and cultural barriers, demonstrating the universal language of innovation. Toward the end of the day, Marcus called Michael to his office. The view of the city skyline brought back memories of their first meeting, but everything else had changed. "When you first walked into my office," Marcus said, "I thought I was taking a risk by listening to a child. Now I understand that the real risk is in not listening to different voices, no matter where they come from." Michael nodded, looking out at the city below. "The best part is knowing that somewhere out there, another kid with a different way of seeing things is getting ready to walk into someone's office with their own revolutionary ideas." As the sun set over the city, the gathered children and adults moved to the observation dome of the academy. The space had been linked virtually with similar domes in schools around the world, creating a global network of young innovators sharing their perspectives and discoveries. Michael stood among them, no longer the singular prodigy who had challenged the financial world, but part of a growing community of minds dedicated to seeing and understanding the world in new ways. His journey had come full circle, transforming not just himself, but creating ripples of change that would continue to spread far beyond anything he could have imagined. Spring brought new energy to both Sterling Financial and the Connections Academy. The integration between business and education had created something unprecedented, a living laboratory where innovation flowed freely between generations and disciplines. Michael, now 7 years old, found himself at the center of an expanding universe of possibilities. One particular morning, the Academy's main hall was buzzing with unusual activity. Students from around the world had gathered for the first Global Connections Summit, an event that would showcase the various ways the Academy's principles had been adapted across different cultures and contexts. "Each culture has its own way of seeing patterns," Michael explained to a group of visiting educators. "When we combine these perspectives, we discover things that no single viewpoint could reveal." The summit opened with a remarkable demonstration. Maria Rodriguez, connecting virtually from her new music-based learning center in Barcelona, led an orchestra of young innovators from 6 continents. Each student had developed their own way of translating data into music, and together they created a symphony of global market trends that revealed surprising correlations. Sarah, watching her son navigate between groups of students and educators, noticed something remarkable. Michael was no longer the exception. He was part of a growing community of young minds who saw the world differently, yet he remained uniquely himself, still wearing his favorite sneakers with his formal clothes, still finding joy in discovering new patterns in unexpected places. Victoria Chen approached with exciting news. "The United Nations Educational Committee has asked us to present our model at their next global conference. They believe the Connections Academy could help address educational inequality worldwide." But Michael had another idea brewing. During lunch, he gathered a small group in the Pattern Lab, including Marcus, Victoria, and several students from different academy locations around the world. "We've been thinking too small," he announced, surprising everyone. "It's not just about education or finance anymore. What if we could apply our connection-finding methods to bigger challenges?" He pulled up a complex display showing global data patterns, climate changes, population movements, resource distribution, and economic trends. The students had been working together to identify correlations that traditional analysis had missed. "Look at these patterns," Michael pointed out. "When we combine Maria's musical analysis with James's architectural modeling and the twins' weather prediction system, we can see solutions that were invisible before." Marcus leaned forward, intrigued. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A new kind of think tank," Michael explained. "Not just for business or education, but for solving global challenges. We'll call it the Global Connections Initiative. Every Academy location would be a node in a worldwide network of problem solvers." The idea caught fire immediately. Students began sharing how their unique perspectives could contribute to understanding different global issues. A girl from India explained how she used traditional mandala patterns to analyze resource distribution. A boy from Alaska described his method of reading environmental changes through indigenous knowledge passed down through generations. Sarah watched as her son's latest vision began taking shape. The nervous little boy, who had once practiced financial presentations in their kitchen, had grown into a confident bridge builder between worlds. always pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Later that afternoon, in a quiet moment between sessions, Michael found himself in the Academy's garden with Mr. Rodriguez. The retired economist who had first recognized his potential was now a beloved mentor to countless students around the world. "Did you ever imagine it would grow like this?" Michael asked, watching butterflies move between the flowers in predictable yet beautiful patterns. Mr. Rodriguez smiled. "The beautiful thing about planting seeds is that you never know exactly how they'll grow. You just have to trust that with the right nurturing, something wonderful will emerge." As the day drew to a close, the global community of students gathered in their respective observation domes, connected virtually across time zones and continents. Together, they watched the same sunset and the same stars emerge, each location adding its own perspective to their shared understanding of the world. Michael stood among them, no longer feeling the weight of being different, but the joy of being part of something larger than himself. The future he had glimpsed in numbers and patterns was becoming reality, not through his efforts alone, but through the combined creativity of countless minds thinking differently together. The announcement of the Global Connections Initiative sparked a wave of excitement that rippled through the international community. Within weeks, organizations and institutions from around the world began reaching out, eager to participate in this revolutionary approach to problem-solving. Michael's daily routine had evolved to balance his various roles. Mornings were still, dedicated to regular classes, where he learned alongside his peers. Afternoons alternated between his advisory work at Sterling Financial and his involvement in the Academy's programs. But it was the early evening hours, when the global network came online, that brought the most exciting developments. One evening, as the sun set over New York, Michael led a virtual gathering in the observation dome. Students and mentors from every connected Academy location joined, their faces appearing on screens that curved around the dome's interior. "Today," Michael began, "we're going to try something new. Instead of just sharing our individual perspectives, we're going to think together about one global challenge." The challenge they had chosen was food security, a complex issue that touched on climate, economic, social systems, and technology. As the discussion unfolded, something remarkable happened. Each participant brought their unique way of seeing patterns to the problem. Maria's musical analysis revealed rhythms in global crop production that suggested new approaches to sustainable farming. The twins' weather prediction system identified opportunities for extending growing seasons. A student from Thailand showed how traditional farming wisdom could be integrated with modern technology. Sarah, observing from the back of the dome, felt a profound sense of hope. These children weren't just solving problems, they were reimagining how problems could be solved. Victoria approached with Henderson, who had become one of the initiative's strongest supporters. "The UN representatives are impressed," she reported. "They want to establish permanent links between the Connections Academy network and their sustainable development programs." But Michael was already thinking beyond institutional partnerships. During a break, he shared his latest insight with Marcus. "We've been focusing on connecting different ways of thinking," he explained. "But what if we could also connect different ways of doing? Every community has its own solutions to problems. If we could link these practical innovations the way we've linked ways of thinking." Marcus nodded, understanding immediately. A global network of not just ideas but actions. The concept quickly took shape. The Academy began documenting and sharing practical innovations from communities around the world. A village in Kenya's water conservation methods were adapted for use in Arizona. A Japanese urban farming technique found new applications in Brazilian favelas. As the evening progressed, Michael took a moment to step away from the activity. He found a quiet corner in the garden where the first stars were becoming visible through the glass ceiling. Mr. Rodriguez joined him carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate, a tradition they had maintained since their early mentoring sessions. "You know what I've learned this year," Michael said, sipping his chocolate. "The most important patterns aren't in the numbers or the markets. They're in the way people connect and share their gifts." Mr. Rodriguez smiled. "And that's something no computer or algorithm can replace. the human capacity to see possibilities and build bridges between worlds. Their conversation was interrupted by excited calls from the dome. The global network had made a breakthrough in their food security project, identifying a pattern that connected climate trends, traditional farming practices, and modern technology in a way that could revolutionize sustainable agriculture. As Michael hurried back to join the discussion, Sarah watched her son with pride. He moved confidently between screens, showing faces from around the world, facilitating a conversation that transcended age, culture, and geography. Yet he was still her little boy, his sneakers squeaking on the floor as he rushed to share in the excitement of discovery. The night deepened, but the energy in the dome remained high. Ideas flowed freely between continents and cultures, each insight building on the last. The Global Connections Initiative was more than just a think tank or a problem-solving network. It was proof that when different ways of seeing the world came together, anything was possible. As the virtual gathering drew to a close, participants from around the world shared a moment of connection. Despite their different languages, cultures, and perspectives, they had created something together that none of them could have achieved alone. Michael stood in the center of it all, no longer the solitary prodigy who had walked into Sterling Financial with a worn briefcase, but part of a global community of innovators. The patterns he had always seen in numbers and markets had led him to an even more important discovery: the infinite possibilities that emerge when people connect across all boundaries to share their unique ways of seeing the world. 1 year and 6 months after Michael's first step into Sterling Financial, the Global Connections Initiative had grown beyond anyone's expectations. The network now included over 50 academies across 6 continents, each contributing its unique perspective to solving global challenges. On a bright autumn morning, Michael stood in the original Sterling Financial boardroom, now transformed into an interactive hub connecting all academy locations. He was preparing for a special presentation, one that would set the course for the next phase of their journey. "Remember, your first presentation here," Marcus asked, joining him early. "You were so small the chair nearly swallowed you whole." Michael laughed, adjusting his tie while keeping his signature sneakers firmly in place. "Now I can almost reach the floor when I sit." The room filled with faces both familiar and new. Sarah sat in the front row beside Mr. Rodriguez and Mrs. Garcia. Victoria and Dr. Chen managed the global video feeds, connecting participants from around the world. Even Henderson, who had become one of the initiative's strongest advocates, looked excited about what was to come. "Today isn't about looking back," Michael began, his voice clear and confident. "It's about looking forward. We've created something amazing together, but there's still so much more we can do." He launched into a presentation that showcased the initiative's latest breakthrough, a revolutionary approach to collaborative problem-solving that combined artificial intelligence with human insight from multiple cultural perspectives. "The AI helps us process and connect the patterns we identify," Michael explained. "But the real magic comes from the human element, the unique ways different people see and understand the world." Maria joined virtually from Barcelona, demonstrating how her music-based analysis had evolved into a sophisticated system for detecting subtle patterns in complex data. The twins, now running their own climate research program, showed how their weather prediction model had helped prevent crop failures in 3 countries. But the most powerful moment came when Michael introduced a new group of young innovators, children from communities that had traditionally been overlooked by the academic and business worlds. "These are the next wave of pattern seekers," he announced proudly. "Each of them sees the world in a unique way, and each has something valuable to teach us." A young girl from a remote village in Nepal showed how she used traditional weaving patterns to understand and predict landslide risks. A boy from the Australian outback demonstrated his method of tracking water resources using a combination of Aboriginal knowledge and satellite data. Sarah watched her son with tears of pride in her eyes. He had grown so much, not just in height, but in wisdom. Yet he had maintained his essential nature, curious, compassionate, and always eager to learn from others. Victoria stepped forward with news that brought excited murmurs from the global audience. The United Nations had officially adopted the Connections model as part of their sustainable development framework. Major universities were restructuring their programs to incorporate the initiative's collaborative approach. But here's what really matters, Michael continued, his young face serious. We're not just solving problems. We're changing how people think about solutions. Every community, every culture, every individual has something valuable to contribute. We just need to create the connections. Marcus stood to make his own announcement. Sterling Financial would be transitioning into a new kind of organization, one that prioritized social impact alongside financial returns. The company would serve as a hub for connecting innovative ideas with the resources needed to implement them. Michael taught us something crucial, Marcus explained. True value isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about the positive impact we can have on the world when we bring different perspectives together. As the presentation concluded, Michael shared his vision for the next phase of the initiative. They would be establishing new academies in underserved areas, creating a global scholarship program, and launching a platform that would make their collaborative problem-solving approach accessible to communities worldwide. But my biggest dream, he said, his eyes shining with enthusiasm, is that someday every child who thinks differently will know that their way of seeing the world is valuable, that they don't need to change to fit the system, because together, we're creating a new system that celebrates all ways of thinking. The applause that followed came from around the world, a global symphony of support for a vision that had started with one small boy's courage to think differently. As the sun set over different time zones, the connected community shared a moment of profound understanding. They were part of something that was changing not just education or business, but the very way humans solved problems together.